Yo, what's going on, guys? Bexio back, and today we got a brand new video talking about Bitcoin, why it is so important, and why this massive price pump could be in the near future. But first, before we cover any of those things, why Bitcoin is so important is these headlines right here. July consumer prices jump 5.4%, but core inflation rises less than expected. But this inflation 5.4% is the inflation rate right now for year over year, which, people argue about it all the time, and it's up because of the closures and everything. But what we got to keep in mind is 5.4%. That is ridiculous. Everyone in the Fed wants to say it's transitory, but they've actually just went back and said maybe it's not as transitory as we thought, which every Bitcoiner has been saying for months now. And because if you raise inflation or raise these prices, why would companies just magically drop their prices again? That doesn't make any sense. But this 5.4%, and it was almost 1% for the month to month, which is still ridiculous. That is insane inflation. And this is what Bitcoin fixes. I mean, we've had how many bills of the $1 trillion infrastructure bill that just got passed? We had like $7 trillion in bills that got passed last year, and we have another $3.5 trillion bill that's in the works for right now. That's like almost 10 to 11 trillion dollars spent in 2 years. That is ridiculous. And that's why Bitcoin has a huge role to play for people's savings and people to actually make sure that they're not losing purchasing power over their saved hard work and hard earned money by people just printing all this money and making all these bills and just spending way more money than anybody has. But that's why Bitcoin's important. Now, looking at the chart here for Bitcoin, we're actually still doing all right. We're almost at 46,000. And you can see we basically got the same rejection off of this line, close to 46.8. So we're like 46,600 before we got really rejected here. And then bounced pretty good, or bounced off of this 45,400 line. So we'll be looking to break this $47,000 to try and, pump over that resistance. And then next target would be 49, 50,000, and then basically not much resistance until we get to almost $60,000, which is exactly what we want to see. We want to see these prices pump, and I do think we're coming to the end of that FUD cycle, and we're really starting to see all of these better news stories, people be more optimistic about Bitcoin and thinking that it has a much bigger future and it is much better at what it's going to try and do. And we can look at some of these charts here, talking about, their primary trend lines. This has a long term, this is almost a year long trend line, upward trend line. And you see we got super big. This was 65,000, fell underneath it and fought it for a bit, and then fell far underneath it. And now we're actually making this run where we've gotten back above it. So we want to kind of make this more support, which we're actually below it right now. So we do want to get back above it and do all that stuff. That's like super short term, but the long-term stuff still bullish. Bitcoin fundamentals, everything continues to grow, and you can see it with another company, Valkyrie, just filed for a Bitcoin futures ETF. They're piling up since the SEC chair said he would be more likely to approve future-based Bitcoin ETFs. That doesn't make any sense to me. Why you would want to approve a future-based one and not, one that's based just in Bitcoin, but I don't know what's going on there, but ETFs continue to grow, continue to be something that people really want. And there's like 10 or 11 companies that have filed for an ETF. Now we got companies filing for futures ETFs. It's just getting kind of ridiculous. And at this point, the US needs to pass a Bitcoin ETF, needs to get one involved so that people can start using it. And then here we got another company. Yesterday we had AMC announcing a Bitcoin acceptance stuff, and they're going to start accepting Bitcoin. Now we've got car insurance company Metro Mile bought $1 million in Bitcoin for its balance sheet. So they're holding Bitcoin. I think this is going to become much, much more popular with insurance companies buying and holding Bitcoin, because then they can lower insurance costs to customers, be more competitive, as well as if they have $1 million in Bitcoin now, and in 5 years that can grow to 3, 4, $5 million, then they would have a lot more money with the upfront capital, and they'd be able to actually very easily ensure people not have to worry as much about how they're going to pay things out. They'll have a bunch of money on their balance sheet. And just looking at some on-chain things for Bitcoin, got whales buying, so $1 million or more in Bitcoin transfers on the rise again. So people who are moving $1 million to $10 million worth of Bitcoin is trending here. You see it's trending up, as well as 10 million plus is even trending up, and then had a sharp trend up recently where this dip around this 30K mark had a huge value transfer up, and the price skyrockets after. So this can go with what we're seeing with like supply shocks, things on exchanges not having supply and the supply leaving exchanges, meaning these huge institutional buyers are buying Bitcoin. Even everyday retail investors are buying Bitcoin as well. They want to be in on this, and the volume, it doesn't show it on here, but the volume for people between like $1 or like $100 to up to that like 100K, 200K, $1 million mark, it has been rising as well. They've been buying too. So Bitcoin is getting adopted by everybody, and that's what we want to see. We want Bitcoin to be something that everyone can get in on, everyone gets to learn about, and we are still so early where people do not understand Bitcoin and don't realize that it's going to have a huge impact on a bunch of things. And some more on-chain analysis, fundamental stuff would be users on Bitcoin network growing at its fastest rate ever. 1.2 million users added in the last 30 days. Does not include off-chain users on exchanges, which typically see up to 3 times this number. So what that means, if you buy Bitcoin on an exchange and you never move it, so you never put it in a hardware wallet, you never move it to BlockFi, move it to another exchange, move it to a software wallet, or do anything like that, you just buy it, keep it on the exchange, and then sell it at some point, or just leave it there. You don't necessarily go on-chain, so you don't ever appear on-chain metrics. So that's when he says if it's 1.2 million users added on-chain, then the numbers could be over 3x. So that could be like 3 to 4 million users added in total, because you don't get that data if they just buy it and hold it on Coinbase or Gemini or something. But Bitcoin growing at the fastest rate ever. We can compare this to the internet. Like in the internet in 1997, I think that's where Bitcoin is right now. It's like 140 million users on Bitcoin is the same about what the internet had in 1997. And then you just see the adoption explode from there and really start to take off. And if we're seeing that with Bitcoin right now, then that'd be a great chance to see that the adoption of Bitcoin continues to go up, the growth continues to go up, users continue to go up. That's all fundamental stuff. Is what's gonna control the price of Bitcoin in the long term. And nobody can argue that that's bearish. Not one person can argue that's bearish. They can only argue the technicals, the lines on a chart, but the fundamentals, which take over long term in the 5-10 year span, that's what's going to explode Bitcoin. And if you want to try and trade Bitcoin to make like an extra 10%, you're not going to care if you made an extra 10% this year, but Bitcoin rallies up like 1,000% in 3, 4, 5 years, or 10,000%, or just takes off to the moon. You're not going to care about that, but you will care about it if you tried to get that extra 10%, failed, and then never got back into Bitcoin, waiting for lower prices because the TA said bearish. So just some things about Bitcoin, a little bit of on-chain analysis, and reasons why it's super important to be in Bitcoin. These inflation headlines are not getting better. They're staying relatively bad every single time. 5.4% inflation. That means from July last year to July this year, if you had $100 in the bank, it's now only worth $94.60. That's all it can buy, even though the dollar amount is still $100. Your purchasing power plummeted. But as always, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. See you guys in my next video.